They said she was too proud to beg and too broken to love again. But when a scarred widow and a grieving rancher signed a winter contract to survive the blizzards of Montana, neither knew it would cost them more than warmth. It would cost them their pride and save what was left of their hearts. This is the winter contract, a story of survival, redemption, and a love built from scars. Welcome back, everyone. Today, we have a powerful story about two broken souls finding strength, not in perfection, but in honesty. If you love stories about resilience and the quiet strength of the human heart, you're in the right place. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss these journeys. The woman dragged the pine log uphill alone. Elias Thorne watched from his horse on the ridge, the late October wind cutting right through his coat. The log was full length, heavy enough that two strong men would have cursed hauling it. She had a thick rope looped over her shoulder, her worn boots digging into the rocky soil. Her faded calico dress was stained with mud to the knees. Most women would have quit an hour ago. He nudged his horse down the slope, the animal picking its way carefully through the scree. The half-built cabin came into view. The walls were barely chest-high, with no roof to speak of. It was surrounded by scattered tools and cut timber. A saggy canvas tent sagged beside it, thin smoke rising from a meager fire pit. She heard his approach and straightened, breathing hard. She didn't run. She didn't call for help. She just stood there, chin up, watching him come. "Afternoon," Elias said, dismounting. He let the reins drop, showing his hands. "That's a lot of cabin for one person. Don't need charity from strangers." Her voice was steady, but her hand stayed on the rope, as if she might need to use it as a weapon. He studied the walls, noting the notched joints. "Roof won't hold without proper bracing. Storm's coming in 2 weeks. Maybe less. I'll manage." Elias looked at her, then really looked. A scar ran from her left temple down to her jawline, old and pale against her weathered skin. "Burns," he guessed, keeping his voice flat. She read his gaze, and her shoulders tightened. "I'm not pretty," she whispered, her voice defensive, like she'd been forced to say it 100 times before. Elias met her eyes. "That's fine. I need honest, not fancy. Winter kills pretty folk first out here." She blinked. Something shifted in her face. It might have been surprise, or maybe just suspicion of kindness. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "Because I'm tired of liars and nice dresses." He picked up her hammer from a stump, testing its weight. The handle was wrapped in strips of cloth to fit a smaller grip. "You got nails." She hesitated, then nodded toward a small crate. "I can pay with labor. I cook. I mend." "Fair enough." He walked to the nearest wall, examining the joints. "What's your name?" "Eliza Stone." "Elias Thorne. I run cattle 3 miles south." He glanced at the sky. The clouds were thickening, and the light was already starting to fade. "We start tomorrow at first light." Eliza watched him ride away until he disappeared into the dark pines. Then she sat down hard on the stump, her hands suddenly shaking. First snow in 2 weeks. First hope in 6 months. She wasn't sure which one scared her more. The next afternoon, Elias crouched by Eliza's fire, examining her tools while she boiled coffee in a dented pot. The hammer handle, the sorted nails, the careful stacks of lumber. Everything spoke of someone who planned, who thought ahead. "You do good work," he said, taking the tin cup she offered. "Taught myself. After my husband died." She handed him the cup. He sipped the coffee. It was strong and bitter, cowboy style. "Town's got a lot of widows. Why buy land out here? Alone?" Eliza's jaw tightened. "A merchant in town wanted me after Marcus passed. Said I needed a man's protection. When I refused." She stared into the fire, her face hardening. Rumors started. Cursed woman. The witch who burned her own house down. Elias said nothing, just waited, giving her the silence. "The fire started during a fight," she continued, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "A lamp broke. I tried to pull him out. He hit me, pushed me back into the flames. I got free. He didn't." She touched her scar unconsciously. "The town buried him a hero. They buried me alive with gossip. So I bought this claim with everything I'd left. Figured if I'm going to be alone, might as well be on my own terms." She looked at him directly, her gaze challenging. What about you? A ranch that size. You should have a wife. Sons even. Elias set down his cup. Had a wife. Isabel. Beautiful woman. Everyone loved her. She wanted town life. Parties, dances, people admiring her. The ranch was boring. He paused, the memory still raw. She died 2 years back. Childbirth. The baby didn't make it either. I'm sorry. Don't be. I loved her, but I didn't like her much toward the end. And she didn't like me either. Truth be told. He stood, brushing the dirt from his pants. The town widows circle me now like buzzards. All performance, no help. I'm drowning in women who want to be Mrs. Thorne, but not one of them wants to be my partner. Eliza stood too, studying him with a new, sharp understanding. So, Elias finished. This arrangement is practical. You need help before winter. I need meals and mending. Nobody needs to make it more complicated. Agreed. They shook hands. Her grip was firm, her palm calloused just like his. Honest. He noticed she didn't look away. We'll start on the roof frame tomorrow, he said as he mounted his horse and rode off. Eliza watched until the trees swallowed him. Then she turned back to her half-built cabin. Something unfamiliar was stirring in her chest. Hope was dangerous, but maybe this once it was worth the risk. 1 week later, the first snow began to fall. Eliza measured a board while Elias sawed, their breath fogging in the cold November air. The cabin walls were complete, and the roof frame was half finished. They worked in an efficient, comfortable silence. A rhythm had developed between them through days of shared labor. Hold this steady, Elias said, lifting a heavy beam. She braced it with her shoulder while he hammered, the sound sharp in the cold. Snow dusted their shoulders, melting against their necks. Marcus used a drink, Eliza said suddenly, her voice quiet. Started after we lost our first baby. He got mean when he drank. Elias kept hammering, but he was listening. That night, he came home drunk, started yelling about supper being cold, about me being useless. He knocked the lamp over during the fight. She stared at the beam she was holding, seeing something else entirely. I tried to save him. Even after everything, I tried. But the fire. She shook her head, pulling herself back. The town decided I must have wanted him dead. It was easier to blame the scarred woman than to admit their church deacon beat his wife. Elias set down the hammer. My wife wanted everything I couldn't give her. Status, excitement. I knew she was unhappy, but I kept hoping the ranch would be enough. He looked out at the mountains, his gaze distant. When she died, my first thought was, I'm free. I've been hating myself for that ever since. Maybe God gives us what we can't keep, so we learn what we actually need, Eliza said quietly. Maybe. Elias picked up his hammer again. Or maybe God's just quieter than preachers claim. The snow intensified suddenly, the flakes growing thick and heavy, driven by a new wind. Elias squinted at the sky. We need to stop. This is turning into a blizzard. You should go, Eliza said, before it gets worse. Too late for that. He moved quickly, securing the heavy tarp over the unfinished part of the roof. I'm staying the night. Eliza's face went carefully blank. There's only one blanket. We'll manage. By nightfall, the storm howled outside. They sat by the fire inside the half-finished cabin, the canvas tarp snapping overhead. They shared Eliza's single blanket around their shoulders, not touching, but close enough to feel each other's warmth against the bitter cold. Eliza pulled a book from her pack. It was water-stained, but intact. Do you read? Barely, Elias admitted. Never had much schooling. I could teach you, if you want. I'd like that. She opened to a marked page and began to read aloud from Homer's Odyssey. Penelope waiting for Odysseus. Her voice was soft but clear, turning the ancient words into something alive in their small, wind-battered shelter. Elias listened like a man starving. Somewhere around midnight, exhausted, Eliza's head drooped and came to rest against his shoulder. He went very still, afraid to wake her, afraid to move. At dawn, she stirred and realized where she was. Their eyes met in the dim light. Neither spoke. Neither pulled away. Then Elias looked through the doorway. Just a frame, no door yet, and his face hardened. What? Eliza asked, sitting up. Horse tracks in the snow. Fresh ones. Someone circled the cabin during the storm. They stood together in the doorway. In the distance, riders approached. 3 men, led by Reverend Gideon from the town of Rust Creek. Elias moved to stand beside Eliza, his presence a clear statement. The town had come calling. 2 weeks later, the cabin was nearly complete. The door was hung, the windows sealed, and the chimney was drawing smoke properly. Eliza plastered the gaps between the logs while Elias fitted shutters outside. She heard him humming. It was the first music this silent, lonely place had known. They found a rhythm. She anticipated his needs, handing him a tool before he asked. He read her exhaustion without asking, ordering her to rest. Their conversations deepened beyond mere survival. You mentioned reading, Elias said during their noon break. What else you got? Eliza produced 3 more books from her trunk. Shakespeare, Whitman, a Warren Bible. These survived the fire. Everything else burned. Read to me again tonight. If you'll help me understand my cattle accounts. I'm good with numbers. We all know people who can't stand to see others build something real, who hide in the shadows. What do you think drives that kind of jealousy? Let me know your thoughts down below while we see what happens next. A messenger arrived that afternoon with supplies from town. The boy wouldn't meet Eliza's eyes. He just dropped the crates and left as fast as he could. A note was pinned to a flour sack. Elias opened it, his face darkening as he read. What is it? He handed it to her. Offer still stands. Honest work for an honest woman. Leave the arrangement. Barlow. Barlow's the merchant, Eliza said quietly. The one who wanted me. Elias crumpled the note. I'm riding to town. No. Eliza caught his arm. Let them talk. These walls don't care about gossip. That evening, she read the Odyssey aloud by firelight. She voiced Penelope's suitors in pompous, ridiculous tones that made Elias laugh. It was a deep, genuine sound that surprised them both. Stunned by the sound of his own joy, he fell silent. Eliza stopped mid-sentence. What? He asked. I haven't heard laughter in this place. Not since I arrived. Me neither, he said, his voice rough. Not in 2 years. They looked at each other across the fire, something unspoken passing between them. Then Eliza smiled, a small, real smile, and kept reading. Outside, hidden in the tree-line, a figure watched through the window. It was one of Barlow's ranch hands, taking notes for his employer. The storm was coming, but not the kind you could shelter from with walls. The blizzard hit mid-December with 3 days of fury. Eliza and Elias were trapped inside. The wind howled so loud they had to raise their voices to be heard. But the cabin held. Every joint, every beam, every nail they had driven together. It all held. Your work's good, Eliza said, her hand on the solid wall. Our work, Elias corrected. They fell into a simple, domestic rhythm. She read aloud for hours. He listened, mending a piece of tack, learning new words just by hearing them. He taught her how to braid rope properly, their hands touching, and she didn't flinch. The second night, she woke up screaming. Eliza! Elias was across the room instantly, his hands visible, non-threatening. You're safe. You're here. The fire's banked. She was shaking, her clothes soaked with sweat despite the cold. I dreamed I was burning again. Marcus was holding me down. He's gone. He can't hurt you. But I'm still afraid. Her voice broke. I hate that I'm still afraid to be touched, to trust anyone close to me. Elias sat on the floor beside her bedroll, careful to keep his distance. When Isabel died, he admitted into the darkness. My first thought was relief. That makes me a coward, doesn't it? It makes you human, she whispered. I haven't touched another person beyond a handshake in 2 years, he said. Scared of what it might mean. Scared I'd mess it up again. They sat in silence, 2 damaged people learning they weren't alone in the dark. The third night, exhausted from the tension, Eliza fell asleep against his shoulder while he was reading haltingly from her book. He was learning. He didn't move until dawn, afraid to break whatever fragile thing was growing between them. She woke, realized where she was, and met his eyes. I'm sorry, she started. Don't be. You smell like pine smoke, she murmured, half asleep still. And safety. You feel like home, he whispered back. Morning broke clear and bright. The storm had passed. They separated awkwardly, both knowing they had crossed a line neither could name. Elias stepped outside to check the chimney and froze. Fresh horse tracks circled the cabin in the snow. Someone had watched them during the storm, close enough to see through the windows. Their privacy had always been an illusion. The week before Christmas, Eliza insisted on accompanying Elias to Russ Creek for supplies. "I'm tired of hiding," she said, her jaw set. "Town's not kind to you. Then they can be unkind to my face." Russ Creek was a collection of wooden buildings around a church and a general store. They arrived on Sunday morning, just as services were letting out. Eliza walked beside Elias down Main Street, chin up, her scar visible in the cold sunlight. Conversation stopped. Women clutched their children, pulling them away. Men stared with contempt, or worse, with unwanted interest. Reverend Gideon blocked the mercantile steps, flanked by the merchant Amos Barlow and 3 church elders. "Brother Thorne," the preacher's voice carried across the silent street. "This woman is known for sin. You defile her, and yourself, with this arrangement." People gathered, forming a crowd, eager for the confrontation. Barlow stepped forward, an oily smile on his face. "Eliza, my offer stands. Honest work at my boarding house. Save both your reputations. End this." The trap closed around them. Public accusation, social pressure, the crushing weight of judgment. Elias felt panic rise, the old instinct to avoid scandal, to protect his name. Isabel had cared so much about appearances. He had spent years enabling that lie. "It's just work," he heard himself say. "The cabin's nearly done." The words hung in the frozen air. Eliza went rigid beside him. Just work. He had reduced everything. The shared nights, the laughter, the confessions, the trust they had built, to simple labor. He had made her nothing again. "See?" Barlow's smile widened. "Even he knows you're not worth defending, Eliza." She turned and walked to the wagon without a word. The silent ride home lasted forever. At her cabin, she climbed down and spoke without looking at him. "Don't come back. The cabin's finished. Our contract is done." She closed the door, the very door he had hung for her, in his face. Elias sat in the wagon, snow beginning to fall again, and understood exactly what he had done. He had chosen reputation over truth, just like he always had. And this time, he had destroyed something real. Christmas week arrived cold and clear. Elias sat alone in his ranch house, a whiskey bottle on the table, staring through the frost-glazed windows at his wife's grave on the hill. The house was warm, well-built, and as empty as a church. He had done it again. Chosen appearance over honesty. Cowardice over courage. Eliza had offered him truth. Rough, scarred, real truth. And he had called it just work to save face in front of people whose opinions meant nothing. The bottle sat untouched. Drinking wouldn't fix this. 3 miles away, Eliza worked alone in the lamplight, finishing the final details. A barn door, a garden fence, small repairs. Her hands moved automatically, but her mind was numb. She should have known better than to hope. Men always disappointed, even the good ones. Especially the good ones, because their betrayals hurt worse. Christmas morning, she woke to find something on her doorstep. A small bunch of wildflowers frozen solid in a block of ice, like preserved memories. No note, just flowers. She carried them inside, set them on the table, and wept. That afternoon, old Silas Croft rode up to Elias's ranch. Silas was 70, weathered as old saddle leather. The man who'd taught Elias everything about ranching. "You look like hell," Silas said, not dismounting. "Feel worse." "Good." Silas's voice was harsh. That woman built more with broken hands than most men manage with whole ones. Your wife wanted pretty. This one wants real. You gonna let fear win twice? What if she won't forgive me? Elias whispered. Then you earned it. But you still gotta try. Or you can die alone in that cold bed you're making. Silas rode off, leaving Elias standing in his empty yard. He looked at Isabel's grave on the hill. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Sorry I couldn't be what you needed. Sorry I couldn't love you the way you wanted." He took a deep breath. "But I'm done apologizing for wanting something real." He saddled his horse and rode to town. That Sunday morning, Elias Thorne stood before the packed church, hat in his hands. "I'm here to confess," he said, his voice shaking but clear. And to set some things right about Eliza's stone. Eliza was on the roof when she heard the hoofbeats. She'd been hammering the final shingles, determined to finish every last thing alone. When Eliza appeared below, she didn't stop working. She didn't even acknowledge him. He dismounted, picked up the spare hammer from the woodpile, and climbed the ladder without asking permission. They worked side by side in silence for an hour. The roof was completed under their joint effort, the last piece of the cabin they had built together. Sitting on the ridgeline, breathing hard in the cold air, Elias finally spoke. I stood in front of the whole congregation this morning, told them everything. He stared at the mountains, told them about my cowardice, about calling us just work when you're the realest thing I've known in years. Told them you're worth 10 of their so-called decent folk. Eliza said nothing, just kept waiting. I said if they wanted to judge someone, judge me. You build a life from ash while they threw stones. He turned to face her. I'm not good with words, Eliza. I proved that last Sunday. But I'm good with my hands. And I'm trying to be good with my heart. What are you asking, Elias? Let me build a life with you. Not pretty, not fancy, just honest. She studied him. The gray streaked at his temples, the weathered face, the earnest, tired eyes that finally saw her clearly. I don't need rescuing, she said slowly. Never did. I know, but I wouldn't mind a partner. Equal share, equal say. Elias extended his calloused hand. Deal. This time, when they shook, he didn't let go. He pulled her close, asking permission with his eyes first. She nodded. Their first kiss was gentle, terrified, and perfect. A sound made them look up. On the horizon, dust was rising. Wagons were approaching. What's that? Eliza asked, her hand instinctively going to his. Town families. Elias smiled a small, tired smile. After my sermon, some folks felt ashamed. They're bringing lumber, tools, food. He looked at her. They want to help build your barn. Our barn, Eliza corrected softly. They climbed down as the first wagon arrived. Families with children, men carrying tools, women carrying food baskets. Reverend Gideon came, awkward and apologetic. Even Barlow slunk past, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The community that had judged them had come to rebuild. Eliza stood beside Elias, watching them work, and felt something she had thought was lost forever. She belonged somewhere again. Late March brought the first true spring day. Eliza awoke in the finished cabin, sunlight streaming through the windows Elias had fitted perfectly. He was asleep in the chair by the banked fire. He rode home most nights, courting her properly, respecting her need for time and space. She watched him sleep. This man who had chosen truth over ease, partnership over appearance. His face was peaceful in a way it hadn't been last fall. He stirred, met her eyes, and smiled. Morning, morning. They cooked breakfast together. Eggs from her new chickens. Bread she'd baked. Coffee he'd brought from town. It was an easy partnership. A comfortable silence. Outside, the garden plot waited. They spent the morning planting carrots, beans, and potatoes. Eliza planted wildflowers at the edges, just because she wanted color. Their hands worked the soil together, planting a harvest, building a future. A rider approached around noon. It was Barlow, hat in hand. Miss Stone, Mr. Thorne. He cleared his throat, looking at the ground. I came to apologize. I misjudged. You didn't misjudge, Mr. Barlow, Eliza interrupted calmly. You just couldn't see past surfaces. Simple as that. I hope there's no hard feelings. There aren't. But there's no business either. Good day, Mr. Pritchard. He left, dismissed, not with anger, but simply without power. He couldn't hurt them anymore. Evening came soft and golden. They sat on the porch. Elias had built her a bench. They watched the mountains turn purple in the fading light. Marry me, Elias said quietly. When you're ready. Could be tomorrow. Could be years. I'm not going anywhere. Eliza took his hand. Ask me when the wildflowers bloom full. I want to say yes when the world's alive again. Deal. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the first stars appear. The cabin stood solid behind them. Every beam, every nail, every moment of shared work was visible in its walls. The new barn rose beside it. The garden held the seeds of future harvests. You know, Elias said, "You're beautiful." Eliza touched her scar, smiling slightly. "I'm scarred. Same thing. Way I see it, just shows you fought. And won." Night fell completely, the firelight glowing warm through the cabin windows. In the meadow, early wildflowers dotted the grass, small, determined, reaching for spring. Pretty fades like summer paint. Fancy breaks under a winter wind. But honest. Honest build a life that holds. And in that holding, broken things don't just mend. They become something stronger. When spring comes, as it always does, love built through hard labor blooms deeper than any flower ever could. The mountains watched over them, ancient and patient, as the cowboy and the scarred woman sat together on their porch, building tomorrow, one quiet moment at a time. And that's where we leave Eliza and Elias, building their future one honest moment at a time. Thank you so much for joining us for this story. If their journey touched your heart, please hit that like button. It truly helps us share these stories with more people. We'll see you in the next one.